Good evening, folks. I hope you're all well and I hope you're all coping in these very strange and unusual circumstances that we find ourselves in at the moment. So my thoughts are with you all. And if you are in need of any support or help, I'm available at all times really during the day via Microsoft Teams, or if you want to drop me an email, I'll try my best to respond to that as quickly as I possibly can. It's unseasonably busy at the moment, but I will make every effort to respond to you in the shortest possible time. So I've just prepared this brief video as an adjunct to the dummy report that I will send you on later this evening as well, which outlines exactly what you need to do for part 2, assignment 2, and I'll talk you through a little bit of assignment 3 as well, which is the brief presentation that you give in support of your documentation. So what will we cover? We'll cover an overview of the assignment. I'll talk you through a little bit about the dummy document, and then we say have any questions at the end. Obviously this isn't live, but you can send me questions via email or Microsoft Teams, whichever you're the most comfortable with, or you can call me directly on Microsoft Teams as well. As I say, I'm at my desk the vast majority of the day, right up until your submission. So if you're in need of any support or help, I can provide that for you. So we'll move on now. In terms of the overview, what it is exactly we're looking for. So assignment 2 is a report, the consultancy report, and it is worth 60% of your overall grade. Now, not forgetting that this is a 40 credit module, so it's quite a sizable module, meaning that there's a 6,000 word submission. So this will be one of the more substantial submissions that you've actually undertaken during your time here at the university. So this is quite a sizable piece of work. So I'll just talk you through the task description here first. So it says that the aim of the consultancy project is to give students an opportunity to undertake investigation of an authentic business challenge. As part of this, students will design and execute an in-depth analysis of a specific industry or sector and combine this with their comprehensive knowledge of respective business disciplines. The student will be required to either A, work closely with an organisation of their choosing and undertake an agreed organisational consultancy project, or B, base their consultancy project on a current issue or problem faced by an organisation covered in the news. Now, there should be a brief caveat here to take into consideration what has happened with the COVID-19 outbreak and how this may impact on you working with an organisation. If you no longer have access to that organisation, or if you need to speak to its staff and can no longer speak to its staff, then we need to tweak what your initial aims and objectives are to make this a workable project for you. If it's an extreme case and what you were doing can no longer be done, we need to have a chat possibly about applying for extenuating circumstances if you feel you've had less time than you would have otherwise had to submit this, which we've already had some extension for this as well to give you a bit more time. So it is the student's responsibility to select the organisation and devise your own project, which then needs to be approved by the tutor, which we can take your first assignment as well as its approval, and you would have had your feedback on that on Moodle now as well. So if you were directly with the organisation, you'll need the organisation's approval, but I don't think that was actually the case for anyone. So, and for most people, there wouldn't be a need for undergoing the ethics process either, unless you are undertaking primary research, which I do believe one person is doing. So we need to get you to fill out an ethics form if that's the case. So you've all gone through a wide range of consultancy topics. And then this is for the actual report. So the consultancy project report, this involves the research, whether that's primary and or secondary, for the project and subsequent drafting of the consultancy report, remembering that your first document was effectively a pitch document to a client, which is providing the virtues and benefits of your consultancy service. This is the actual carrying out of the consultancy service. So the report's formats, aims and objectives will have been specified in the project description document, which was task 1, to allow the final report to be assessed against the project description document. Now, it should be noted that these can be updated in line with feedback from the first task, but this will be needed to be explicitly noted in task 2, or assignment 2 rather. So some of the feedback I provided you with, a lot of people will need to sharpen up their aims and objectives and make them a little bit more specific and a little bit more smart. Smart in the sense of being specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. So we need to make sure that if you are making any changes to your aims and objectives, that's made explicitly clear and with justification as part of this report as well. So the report's content will vary according to your project specification and depending on what was produced for the project's rationale document. However, task 2 must provide a direct response to the aims and objectives from that first task. So this is typically going to include things like business plans, marketing strategies, feasibility studies, and other reports, which was agreed in that initial project description document. The report should follow an accepted report format, i.e. have an introduction, executive summary, detailed research methods, data collection relevant to the project, your findings, conclusions, and strategic recommendations, as well as any appendices and a reference section. So you may also need to include potential records of evidence of research undertaken and the use of management theories, such as SWOT, PEST, competitor analysis, etc. So these can be included in the main body or in the appendices depending on their relevance to the discussion. So that is the high level overview. As I said, you have the dummy document as further support to this as well, and the dummy document will have a number of sections. So we'll just cover off what the main sections of these are, and so you'll have the actual document itself for reference. So the dummy document should involve a front page. So I think a lot of you have had these dummy documents off me before, so I want something professional looking in terms of your front page, including some sort of graphic or insignia, typically the university's insignia, and the project title, along with the module name, project name, your name and student number as well. And then for your table of contents, I would expect this to have both your main and subheadings included in that as well, along with page numbers, and all, let's say, the primary sections. You should also include any lists of figures and lists of tables and any appendices that you're including as part of the document. Do not include blank lists of figures or blank lists of tables just because they're in the dummy document. Only include these if you're actually going to include tables and figures. I also do like to see as well that the headers for the section, these are all going to be included in the dummy document. You can edit these, but it's just a good practice thing to include. So the first thing you'll get into the meat of is the executive summary. So the executive summary should be a one-page overview of what is contained within your document. So this is so very often where people start to lose marks in the very first instance, and something that can be very much avoided. We end up very, very often getting what is effectively a prose version of your table of contents that is a signpost of what is contained within the document. So I don't need that signpost, I need an actual summary of your work. So it is not sufficient to say you will discuss certain things within the report. You need to provide an actual summary of what the report has found and what you recommend as well. Basically, this is the one page that everyone reads in the real world, effectively. So it's a very useful skill to try and develop to be able to write good executive summaries for when you leave university and you get asked to write reports, because you will need to be able to distill a great deal of information into something digestible and accessible, and something that can be read in just a few minutes as well. The actual main body of the document will more typically only be read by people who really need to understand the detail, but if you need a lot of people to appreciate what you're trying to get across, a good executive summary is an essential way of doing this. So typically we'd expect to see an outline of what the purpose of the report is about. So the remit, the brief of the report, a short background on the project itself and on the organisation. What are the findings of your report? What are your conclusions and what are your recommendations? Again, it's not good enough to say that there are recommendations. I would need an actual summary of your recommendations as well. Important to note that your executive summary are not included in the overall word count, nor are table of contents or references at the back. So again, quite a substantial piece of work, but that won't be included as part of the word count. So the next section then would be your introduction, where you typically restate what the report brief is, imagining the person who's reading the report isn't me, isn't the lecturer. It's someone who is entirely uninitiated, but it still needs to be professionally done. And you need to explain what the purpose of the report is. So in this case, it's in response to the project initiation document and is the actual consultancy that you're providing to your client. Background on the organization. So this is just a very brief sentence or two really, because you would have covered this in your project initiation document, and just a little bit about the context. The next part that I expect to see is a restating of your aims and objectives. So this is about what the project is trying to achieve. It'll largely be centered around your first document. Try and make them smart, as I say. They should be, hopefully, near enough a repetition of what was done in your first assignment. However, it is okay to update these premised on feedback if you've received from that first assignment. If you've made changes to those aims and objectives, you need to make sure that it's very clear that you have. As I said, there is some feedback for some of you guys there to make these a bit smarter and a bit sharper, so you need to include that there. So the next part then is the main body of the document. So this is where you'll put the lion's share of effort into this. So in the main body, you'll need to deliver on what you've said you would do in the first document. For instance, if you've said you're going to develop a marketing plan for the organization, this is where you will actually include that marketing plan. So I can't really give you too much detail on structure. Well, I can, in terms of structure I can, but in terms of the detail of that, it's quite difficult to do. So one of you has said that they're going to do a marketing plan. So as a for instance here, it would be a good place to put a typical marketing plan structure in place. So I would recommend something like the SOSTAC model to actually structure the rest of your main body. For the rest of you guys, the main body is going to take a fairly natural flow from what you're doing. If you've carried out primary research, this is where you'd actually present your primary research. So if you had graphs, tables, figures, etc. from questionnaires, or you might include some extracts from interviews that you've done, and that's where it'll reside. Important here as well, again, this is a sizable document. You need to be making sure that you're relating this work, your findings, back to the academic work as well. So as I say, it's a fairly chunky 6,000 word report. I would want to see some good engagement with the literature here as well. So we'd be looking at somewhere in the ballpark of 40 good, credible citations here. So to get the best possible marks as well, don't be afraid of being critical of some of that existing literature. And if you include primary data, be sure to include any limitations in the process that you went through. I think actually for everybody involved, it might be worth in the document making note of the coronavirus COVID-19 outbreak, because as I say, this is actually a piece of consultancy work that you would have been undertaking, and there would have been certain structures and certain problems that you ran into as a result of the COVID-19 outbreak. So it's quite good to make note of that here as well. So say that the main body is largely going to be premised on what you've committed yourself to in the first assignment. So as I say, the dummy document will give you some guidance, and this video will give you some guidance, but I think it's quite important that you check in with me at least once so I can take a look at what you've got so far and perhaps give you some pointers in terms of direction and help you at least structure some of your content, so we can talk about a few subheadings and the like, and that might give a sense of direction and a sense of narrative to the report as well. But for the most part, I think some of you should have fairly natural structures that fall out of the first assignment that you pull together. So then we move on to your conclusion. So this is mostly a fairly, well, it is a fairly brief summation of the document, so we're not going to have any particularly new information here. It's just largely going to be a summary. But then recommendations, this can also be quite a substantial part of your report, again partially depending on how you've structured the main body element. So I want to make sure that you make your recommendations very clear, remembering that you are providing a service to a client. So you're putting yourself in the shoes of the consultancy. So it's no good saying that something may be effective or might be helpful. You are the expert in this situation, so make sure you're being quite assertive in the points that you are trying to get across to your audience. And be sure as well to include measures for success. So how do we know that this project has been a successful project? So it could be looking at things like the number of social media followers that you have, or if you're looking at increasing sales or reducing attrition of staff members. All of these are good examples, but then you need to tell me that you have a span of control over this, that you're reviewing this on a monthly basis. You're not actually going to do this, but you need to show me, to demonstrate to me, that you have an understanding of how you would actually control the project outcome. So similarly, if you'd carried out some primary research and then you made recommendations, so let's say for instance, if I make up an example that you were looking to enhance the motivation of staff working in a small to medium-sized enterprise, and you carried out a number of interviews, and you would then possibly, as a measure, carry out follow-up surveys. Again, you're not actually going to carry out these surveys, but this is just giving some indication you understand the process in order to put a measure in place. Okay, so most importantly, your recommendations should follow the arguments you made in the report. So don't spend a huge amount of time explaining what your findings are and then change direction at the end. So we do often see that, so I just wanted to make sure there was a caveat in there as well. And you'll have to give the presentation, so make sure what your presentation is actually in line with the document that you produce, and get feedback from me. Okay, so I'm available to people. Microsoft Teams is probably the easiest way to get hold of me, and we can have a video conference call, and I'll talk you through and I'll give you as much feedback as I possibly can, as much help and support as I possibly can as well. So the marks available for your report. So for engagement with literature, there are 10 marks available. So your work must be informed and supported by scholarly material that is relevant to and focused on the tasks set. You should make use of scholarly reviews and primary sources where appropriate, for example, refereed research articles and or original materials appropriate to the discipline. You should provide evidence that you have accessed a wide range of sources, which may be academic, governmental, industrial, and these sources may include journal articles, textbooks, current news articles, organizational documents, and websites. You should consider the credibility of your sources. Academic journals are normally highly credible sources, whilst websites require careful consideration and selection and should be used sparingly by comparison. Any sources you use should be current and up to date, mostly published within the last 5 years or so, though seminal and important works in the field may be older. You may provide evidence of your own research and own reading throughout the work using a suitable referencing system, which is the Harvard referencing system in this instance, using in-text citation in the main body of your work and a reference list at the end of your work. So guidance specific to this assessment, you should show a wide level of reading, a minimum of 40 references from a wide variety of sources, including textbooks, academic journals, and academic-based websites. For knowledge and understanding skills, there are 20 marks available. So at level 6, you should be able to demonstrate coherent and detailed knowledge and a systematic understanding of the subject area, at least some of which is informed by the latest research and or advanced scholarship within the discipline. You should be aware of the uncertainty, ambiguity, and limits of knowledge. Your work must demonstrate the growing extent of your knowledge and systematic understanding of the concepts and underlying principles associated with the subject area. Knowledge relates to the facts, information, and skills you've acquired through your learning. You demonstrate your understanding by interpreting the meaning of the facts and information. This means that you need to select and include in your work the concepts, techniques, models, theories, etc. That the task is set. You should be able to explain the theories, concepts, etc. meaningfully to show your understanding. Your grade will also depend upon the extent to which you demonstrate your knowledge and understanding. Ideally, each should be completed and detailed with comprehensive coverage. So guidance specific to the assessment, you need to demonstrate a sound understanding of management theory. So this can be PESTLE, SWOT, competitor analysis, again, all depending on what you committed yourself to in that initial project initiation document. So for cognitive and intellectual skills, there are 30 marks available. You should be able to, at level 6, critically evaluate evidence, arguments, assumptions, abstract concepts and data, some of which are at the forefront of a discipline. To devise and sustain arguments, to make judgments and or solve problems, describe and comment upon particular aspects of current research or equivalent advanced scholarship in the discipline. Your work must contain evidence of logical, analytical thinking, evaluation and synthesis. For example, to examine and break information down into parts, make references, compile, compare and contrast information. This means not just describing what, but also justifying why, how, when, who, where, at what cost, etc. At all times, you must provide a justification for your arguments and judgments. Evidence that you have reflected upon the ideas of others within the subject area is crucial to you providing a reasoned and informed debate within your work. Furthermore, you should provide evidence that you are able to make sound judgments and convincing arguments using data and concepts. Sound, valid conclusions are necessary and must be derived from the content of your work. Where relevant, alternative solutions and recommendations may be proposed. So guidance specific to this assessment. You need to demonstrate a critical understanding of the source of your data and information. Show limitations, their meanings, and or impact of how these can be overcome. The information provided must be meaningful to your project. So for practical skills and application, bearing in mind this is a piece of consultancy work, so again there are 30 marks up for grabs here. At level 6, you should be able to apply the methods and techniques you have learned to review, consolidate, extend, and apply your knowledge and understanding, and to initiate and carry out projects. You will deploy accurately established techniques of analysis and inquiry relevant to the discipline, and apply them in complex and unpredictable contexts to devise and sustain arguments and or to solve problems. You should be able to frame appropriate questions to achieve a solution or identify a range of solutions. You should be able to demonstrate how the subject-related concepts and ideas relate to real-world situations of a particular context. You should show awareness of the limitations of the concepts and theories when applied in particular contexts. So guidance specific to this assessment, consider how the information researched and presented could have an impact on organizational change. How could the change be implemented? Think about the required resources in terms of time and cost. And finally, there are 10 marks available for transferable skills for life and professional practice. For this, your work must provide evidence of the qualities and transferable skills necessary for graduate level employment, requiring the exercise of initiative and personal responsibility and decision-making in complex and unpredictable circumstances. This includes demonstrating the learning ability for professional development to advance existing skills and acquire new competencies of a professional nature that will enable you to assume significant responsibility within organizations, that you can initiate and complete tasks and procedures, whether individually and or collaboratively, that you can use appropriate media to effectively communicate information, arguments and analysis in a variety of forms to specialist and non-specialist audiences, fluency of expression, clarity of effectiveness in presentation and organization, and work should be coherent and well structured in presentation and organization. So in terms of guidance that is specific to this assessment, the project description document and the consultancy report need to be written in report formats, making sure you follow the guidelines set out in the specification. So hopefully that's given you a reasonable understanding of what the marks available are for you. And very quickly we move on to assignment 3. So assignment 3 is worth 20% of your mark. I won't have to go through this in quite so much detail because a lot of it follows on effectively from the assignment 2 document that you'll produce. So this is a 5-minute, at the most 10-slide presentation, and we will arrange with you individual slots for June the 1st for this. This doesn't really need to take up too much of your time. As I said, when you've built the document, just drag out some of the main points of that document and your first document as well in order to build your presentation. So the slides really can be an aide-memoire, a prompt to you, and I only need you to talk me through for 5 minutes via Microsoft Teams your presentation. So this should be a very simple part of the process. So I'll just talk you through the very high level here. So the presentation, students will be required to make a formal 5-minute presentation of their project. We initially said to your peers, but it'll just be me as a tutor now, so hopefully that takes a little bit of the pressure off as well. So this is no more than 10 PowerPoint slides or alternative presentation software should you prefer. The slides can be emailed to me. Actually, it's fine. You could just email them to me on the day, and also you need to share your screen with me on Microsoft Teams. So the presentation itself needs to capture the essential elements of both task 1 and task 2. So at a minimum, it should contain the following. So the context for the study. So I need to know a little bit about the industry and the company background. The rationale for the project, which is from your project initiation document. So rationale effectively just means the reason why. Why was this a project that you needed to undertake? So more often than not, it's because you've spotted a problem with the organization or a problem in the sector, and that needs addressing. So that's the rationale. So why is it important to be looking at this? The original aims and objectives. So this is very, again, broad stroke, talking me through the process. What were you trying to achieve? How were you going to achieve it? And then you can talk me through if there were any changes to those original aims and objectives for part 2. And then the original project plan. So you can talk me through your Gantt chart that you would have produced for part 1 of the assignment. And I think as well, again, important for part of that discussion to involve the COVID-19 crisis and how that would have had an effect on your project timeline. Again, this is not simply a piece of academic work. You are looking at this as a proxy for real life, as a simulation of an actual piece of consultancy work. So you would have to take into consideration certainly something as catastrophic and unprecedented as the COVID-19 crisis. So it would be good to bed that into some of the discussion here as well. And then we move on to the main findings from your consultancy report and any recommendations premised on that as well. And I would like you to finish off with some of the measures that you put in place to ensure the success of the project. So again, most of the hard work has actually been done already. So I want to give you a little bit of specific guidance. So for the engagement with literature, for instance, there are 10 marks available, but you would have already done all of this reading for parts 1 and part 2. So just make sure that reading becomes evident as part of your presentation. So drop in a few citations into your conversation, into your presentation. Again, showing you've already read a wide level of reading from a variety of sources, and they can be textbooks, academic journals, academic-based websites, industry websites. They should be the same citations you've used in task 1 and task 2. So very easy to pick up marks again effectively without having to do any significant additional or any meaningful additional reading. For knowledge and understanding of skills, again, nothing new under the sun here because you've already done this work, but it's just reiterating it via the medium of presentation. So you need to demonstrate a sound understanding of the management theory. So if you use Petals or SWOT, or whether you use SOSTAC, you need to be able to explain that and respond to some questions on that as well. And there are 20 marks available for that. 30 marks then available for your cognitive and intellectual skills. So you'll need to demonstrate a critical understanding of the sources of data and information. So if you've done your primary research, you need to explain how that links into the literature, and you may again have to face a couple of questions on that. And then for practical application skills, 30 marks available again here, and you should demonstrate through a clearer explanation of the tools and techniques deployed during in task 1 and task 2, and demonstrating the synthesis of ideas. How did you get to your conclusions? How did you get to your recommendations, and are they achievable as well? And finally, then, marks for transferable skills for life and professional practice. So your slideshow should be clear, concise, professionally presented, and that means in terms of its aesthetic, but your presentation. I know you won't be standing in front of me, but your diction, pronunciation, the pace that you go, making sure it is as professional as if you were standing in front of me in a lecture theatre. So presentation skills can still be taken into consideration despite you physically not being in front of me. Okay, so we can finish on any questions here. So as I said earlier on, you can contact me via Microsoft Teams, you can contact me via email, and I will do my level best to get back in touch with you as soon as I possibly can. The questions can be related to anything. I know some people will be worried about time frames, so if you are considering applying for extenuating circumstances because your key workers or have had difficulty with IT, or there are just problems at home that make studying difficult, it can be family, etc. I understand it's a very difficult situation, and my thoughts are with you all, and I do hope you're all coping well. So you can contact me at any time for any support that you need. And if you have any questions in relation to the dummy document, or any questions in relation to the presentation or the assignment 2 or 3, please do get in touch. So it just remains for me to say very best of luck with pulling this together. You'll get all the support that you need. Please do just contact me and you can have that. I hope you're all looking after yourselves, looking after your loved ones, and being as safe and careful as possible, and abiding by all of the guidelines. And I know there's been some lack of clarity in this last day or so, so I do hope you are sticking clearly to the guidelines that have been provided by the Welsh Government in particular, and that's still to stay at home, protect the NHS and save lives. And it's a very important time for us all to be taking care of one another. So my thoughts are with you all. I do hope everyone is as good as they can possibly be in these very strange and unusual circumstances, and I do hope to see you guys on the other side of this, hopefully in the near future, and I hope that we all get to celebrate together at your graduation as well. So as I say, any questions at all, please don't hesitate to get in touch. I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you, guys.